recommend trying to move over to other meeting. Oh, there it is. Fine.
Yeah, it started. Okay. Someone was removed. I hope they join in soon. Okay, I'll just give a brief introduction, then we can begin. Greetings and a very good evening to everyone present here. I am Vidya Rashmi Hanehalli, and I will be hosting the student talk today on behalf of Proteus, the biology club of IISER Thiruvananthapuram. Our speaker for today is none other than Bharat Joshi, an alumnus of Batch 60. He completed his major project from the lab of Dr. Sabri and is currently working in the genomics bioinformatics team at a US-based startup, Digby Health, involved in digital therapeutics. The talk will focus on a basic understanding of the differences between established companies and the startups, how R&D teams fit into these companies, and why you should probably consider startups as a viable alternative to academia. Please remember to keep your microphones muted and videos off throughout the duration of the talk. Further, I request everyone to kindly hold their questions till the end of the talk, wherein we will have an engaging interactive session. Now, without further ado, I would like to hand over the virtual mic to Bharat. Thank you.
Well, hello everybody. So my name is Bharat, as you probably heard. I am working currently at a company called Digby Health, and the idea is essentially the field essentially is called digital therapeutics, and the concept. I'll first actually begin by explaining what the concept of it is. I'm apologies, so I haven't had a lot of time to prepare for this entire talk because there's been a lot of work going on. There's also some home issues, so bear with me and my stuttering for a while. The concept of this field is essentially based on so the current field of medicine is based on something called a diagnosis plus treatment model, where we essentially wait for a person till he has a diagnosable disease. We then move on to recommending solutions for treating the disease. And what these startups like Digby Health and others in the current space represent is a move towards something called the cure plus prevent model, where we are starting to move, instead of waiting for the disease to become diagnosable, we're trying to predict the disease. We're trying to figure out what exactly is related, what all genetic variants are related to the disease. We're trying to predict it, and moving towards a model where we can prevent the occurrence of the diagnosable disease, as opposed to uh, having to treat what comes with it later on. So that's the basics of the company essentially. And well, let's just think about what exactly was supposed to be mentioned in the talk. The idea was startups, right? So what exactly is a startup? It is, in the barest sense of the words, a business idea. Somebody starts off with a business idea. They have a product in mind that they want to market, and they believe that there is a market available for the product. They will ask for some funding from XYZ investors, and with this funding, these people will end up employing people who are relevant to the field that they want to create the product in, and sell their product. And if it's marketable and it works, then the value of the company that is selling the product will also rise, and eventually it will become a fully fledged company that's able to make profit on its own. And that is why we're seeing a lot of these ideas, or at least in India, we're seeing a lot of these ideas being funded. So that is a startup. And the key thing to keep in mind here is the fact that, unlike companies which are fully fledged and already have working infrastructure, startups are very, very fluid. They have a lot of working pieces. There's a lot of ideas that are floating around. The companies are essentially like 150 to 200 people, a small set of people, or even less at times. And there is a lot of things going on around, because there is no established hierarchy. You don't have a person, you have a CEO sitting at the top, obviously, but below that, the hierarchy is essentially fluid. For example, me, a person who's just entered the company, can easily go up to and talk to the main scientist or the senior scientist and just broach him an idea. And if they like it and we can implement it quickly, we just say, go ahead and do it, as long as it's something that can be done fast. So um, the fact that this lack of hierarchy exists, unlike other companies where you have managers, where you have to go through various channels of bureaucracy to get an idea into the stage where you can even start to implement it, is something that I find personally like very attractive about startups. So these companies, obviously, but keep in mind the fact that when you have this sort of structure or lack of structure, there's going to be a lot of work to do. There's going to be a lot of ideas floating around. There's going to be, your head is going to be essentially in the clouds 90% of the time, and a lot of people are going to be throwing stuff at you. So you have to be ready for it, and you have to be at least um, self-sufficient in a way, to the point that like you can, when you're given a task, you should be able to accomplish most of it, or at least 90% of it by yourself, as long as things don't get in, as long as like other things don't get in the way. So um, are there any questions about this? Like, I want to make it so that this is an interactive talk from the beginning itself, because like as long as, unless I can gauge what level, or like what level of understanding we're all at, I won't be able to proceed further. I won't be able to understand what exactly it is that the audience wants here. So firstly, let's just start with a question, simple question. Does anybody have any thoughts about entering the industry? Or like what does is there anybody who thinks anything about the industry? I'm just going to ask that, throw that out there. Is there anybody who wants to answer? Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay. How do you enter industry? Like you
Yeah.
just up.
How do you enter the
That's the
industry?
point. Like, do you apply? How you make
That
a
is a
resume
really
and then
interesting.
apply, or how does it go?
Yeah, so that's a really, really interesting thing, because what, and this is going to be like this is going to be something that I don't have, that I'm not completely experienced in, because my level of experience is essentially 4 months. And what I did was essentially I sent my CV over to a person that I knew was involved in the space, and he recommended me to somebody else, and that person was interested in taking me on, so they let me in. And startups are going to be a lot like that, where it's a very, very fluid mechanism. Like I said, there is no hierarchy, there is no infrastructure. They don't have in place first round interviews, second round interviews. They don't have that nonsense, or I won't call it nonsense, but they don't have all that like tower built up. So you essentially have to find a way to reach out to that person, and if they look at your CV and they see something that is like applicable to what they're doing, they will talk to you. And at least that's what happened with me. I was contacted by the senior scientist. I had a small talk with that person, and what attracted me to the company was the fact that a, they're a startup, the lack of hierarchy obviously that I mentioned, and b, the amount of data that they collect. And this is like I can't show you the data obviously, but there there is truckloads worth of data to analyze, because each single person within the system will have a genetics report, they'll have a microbiome report. And when I say okay, I probably didn't explain this part, but the idea of the company is, we take skin or like genetic samples, and we take microbiome samples. We send those to a lab that will analyze them, or like give us the raw data. We then analyze the raw data that we get with regards to genetic variants that could affect a person's risk to certain diseases or certain tendencies. And then we start by recommending them different lifestyle or healthier food, essentially. So lifestyle, health, all of these different choices. And using that, we try to improve their quality of life, so that, well, they can do whatever they want to better, because improving quality of life is pretty important. So yeah, that is the basic idea of the company. And as for how you approach these startups, essentially it's going to be finding a way to get in contact with the people who are part of the field that you're interested in. It's a very, very fluid workflow. I can't recommend per se that, hey, if you want to join uh, a company that works in this, like, there is no set specific way to go through this. You don't have applications that you have to send out. Direct contact is basically the best way. And you can't be scared of essentially having to talk to these people, because they're going to want to know exactly who you are and what exactly you can do before they get you into the company. So yeah, does that answer?
So you have to directly contact them, like look up on
Yeah.
the internet or LinkedIn or like profiles, like
Yes, yes, yes.
surf through every possible place you know, and then you just mail, ask them, can I
Yeah.
join?
Yes, yes. You basically tell them the most important thing should be why exactly it is that you're interested. When I was interviewed, I was told, like after I was interviewed, I was told, well, not interviewed. I just had a small chat with the senior scientist, and after that, he told me that the main reason that he was interested in getting me on the company was the fact that I immediately latched onto the fact that they have loads of data, and I absolutely love data. Like, you give me a set of 10,000, 15,000, whatever number of files. You tell me, okay, we need to do exploratory data analysis on this. I'm like, yes, I would love to do this. I'm your man. Even if I suck at it, I will still go ahead and do everything that I can in my power, because I love big data essentially. So he saw that, and then he was like, okay, fine. This looks like a person that's worth having on the team. So yeah, the reason matters basically. So yeah, that's the basic idea of like, and I'm really apologize that like I can't enter specifics, like I can't give you specifics, because firstly I only have 4 months worth of experience. I've been hired by one startup, so that's one more than zero, so that's probably a pretty good idea. But that's essentially what I can tell you so far right now. And the reason that you're joining actually matters, because once you join also, you will be continuously judged with regards to what sort of output you have, and what sort of what you can provide to the company with regards to like your ideas and your conclusions from exploratory data analysis or some sort of debugging efforts. So it's going to matter that you can actually do what you've put on your CV. Yeah, it's the basic, I guess. Any other questions with regards to this?
Okay. So I understand that the lack of hierarchy in a startup is what attracted you to it in the first place, right? But at the same
Yeah.
time, I kind of think that it's risky because it's so new and it's not as well established as other businesses.
Yeah, but
So,
what? Go ahead. Go ahead.
so how do we look for red flags basically if we do want to work at a startup?
Mm, if you want to work at a startup looking for red flags, those will essentially start off like at the interviews themselves, like within the interviews themselves, they start off like, when you say red flags, what exactly do you mean? Because an organization that is so spread out, essentially, it is, you will be part of like a single thing. There'll be like, when you say red flags, what exactly do you imply by them? Like, are you saying that is there any clues that you can get that the workspace might be bad, like the environment might be bad, it might not be conclusive,
Yeah, it's
like
mostly
conducive?
regarding the environment and stuff.
Yeah. So something like, okay, your coworkers might be tough and like things might happen. So that issue, I'm really not like sure whether it should be something that crops up, because when you have an environment that is so open, when you can approach literally anybody and anyone, at that point of time you can also approach the people who are in charge. Like, so if you have a conflict, you can simply just go to the higher level or highest level and solve it there. There is no reason to get like to like start fighting amongst yourself or amongst your peers. You can simply go to the higher group and say, okay, we have this disagreement with regards to implementing whatever strategy. Or like, obviously ego issues should definitely not exist. Like, if there is an ego issue, then there's a problem on both sides, and people will be able to recognize if the problem that you have is an ego issue. But it will manifest as something that comes up as a disagreement in method or methodology or any sort of like other way in which things should be done. So you can very easily approach higher levels to sort out these sorts of problems. And that is where I'm saying that the interview itself, you will be able to gauge how properly or like how well this works. Because if the higher levels are in order, if those people are actually capable of understanding and listening to what's happening on the ground, at least with from people like you, because the company is pretty small, there's like 150 people total, so it's not very, it is. And these companies are also like, these 150 people are divided into different groups. We have a genomics team, we have a microbiota team, we have people who are involved in the coaching aspect, the wellness aspect, we have people who are involved in HR. So all of these will be separate teams. So within your own team, it should be very easy to approach a higher authority. And if that higher authority, whether or not that higher authority is competent enough to be able to solve this dispute, that is something that you should also be able to judge by the interview itself. Is that okay?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's the basics of it. And with, I think I have like one small thing to say with regards to like getting into startups, as was mentioned by the first question. The idea, or like whatever's happening currently in, let's say, IISER TVM, for example, we are studying And probably this is also like extending into the reason for why nowadays a lot of industry positions will say masters with 2 to 3 years of experience, or PhD with 1+ years of experience. And when you look at these job requirements, it feels so unrealistic. Like, what the hell are these guys expecting? Why do they want this much from the students? And why do they not expect freshers in general? And I was looking at, or I was thinking about my course structure for the first, like, across the 5 years. And what I noticed was, like, after you enter, and this is specifically tailored toward biology, after you enter towards biology, we have done immunology, we have done cancer research, we've done cancer biology, we've looked at microbes or like microbiology, we've seen cell biology, we've done biochemistry, and it's a lot of it. We are being introduced at a very, very small depth to 20, 30 different subjects across the course of our 2 years. And then we spend the last year doing our masters in one of these subjects. And the issue that I have with that approach is the fact that whenever you are, firstly, the fact is that you're doing, there's a lot to be done. And the way IISER combats this, the fact that you're being introduced, like you're getting 1% into 20, 30 different subjects, and you're not able to penetrate at all with just the classes themselves. And the way IISER combats this is by giving you the free time and the freedom to do whatever it is that you want. So, for example, I would finish my classes in third year, fourth year, fifth year, pretty much. Third year, fourth year, I would finish my classes. I would go back home and I would start messing around with my laptop. I would start like building tiny toy games in Unity. I built a game of life simulation in Pygame. I've I tried for my projects, I would try to do something bioinformatics related. So I remember trying to build my own Blossom matrix using proteins that I downloaded, or like protein FASTA files that I had downloaded from various different websites and portals like NCPI. So fun little things like these are what will allow you to penetrate slightly deeper into the subjects and techniques that you like employing. So if it is something like if there is something that you like doing in the wet lab or even dry lab techniques that you like employing, please try and start using them more. This is just generic advice that I'm giving you, because when you start going out into industry positions, and the probability is that likely you will end up in doing industry work in, like, at some point of time, unless you all want to become academicians, which is like rather surprising. So please try and penetrate deeper into the subjects that you start enjoying. If you like something, I don't know, hell, you like anime, let's say you like anime, look into the animation techniques that people are using. I was playing a video game just like recently, Doom 2016. There are some incredible talks about this game itself, about how they made the AI lifelike. So they used a lot of linear algebra, they used a lot of different equations to come up with this AI and make it so that it turns around its head to track the players. It generates corrections on its animations, so that the animators don't have to do the work of making animations for every single thing. Instead, it's just taken into account, and the flight path or something is changed for the model. So every single time you see something that you come across interest, please try and penetrate deeper into it, because just the education that is given to you in the class itself is not going to be enough to, like, go out into the industry directly, specifically. So I guess push harder would be my generic advice in that aspect. Hmm. Anything else?
Hello,
Well,
I
I guess,
had a doubt. So,
yeah.
you're doing industrial project. So, how important do you think is coding in this aspect if we want to do it? Like, since most of us are bio majors, we're not really used to it. Although now,
No,
due to the data science course
okay,
introduced, it's
this,
helpful.
yeah. So you told me data science courses. I had I had some experiences with students who had done data science courses, and yeah, it was really interesting situation where, like, you can give a person a problem and they've done a course pertaining to Python or something, but they can't translate that over to essentially anything at all. Like, you show them a Linux command line, you tell them what cat is, how cat works, for example, like cat command, how zless works, how these different commands work. And because of the fact that they've only done coursework, it's essentially they will not understand how to translate that over. So learning a language, for example, when I learned Python, I essentially learned it off the web because I did not have any sort of resources. The data science courses that you guys are taking started about when I was in fourth year, essentially. So I did not have any option to just go back in time and start opting for a data science minor. I had taken chemistry and chemistry subjects. I never ended up getting a minor at all because I was too focused on learning coding and stuff for myself. And the major point is that coding is not really important depending on what it is you want to do, because if you want to do something that involves coding, you need to enjoy coding to do that. Basically, if there is wet lab techniques that you enjoy employing, then that is something that you're going to need to practice. You're going to need to go out into the lab, and people just don't do this. I've seen like across the board, even with my batchmates, there were people who got like amazing grades, and those people essentially on the strength of their grades they went out, and grades demonstrated commitment and their commitment to like learning stuff and like sticking through with the course. And I didn't have great grades because I couldn't stick to the subject. I couldn't really like find a reason to do essentially most of what I was doing. So I never had the best grades in my class. And what I did have, however, was the tenacity to pursue things that I was interested in, and that matters to me a lot more. Where if there is something that you like and coding is a required skill for that particular industrial task that you want to do, then you have to go ahead and learn how to code, basically. And this learning how to code is not going to come from classes. It will come partially from classes. Yes, you can learn a little bit of how for loops work and how this works and how that works, but the most important skill is essentially how to Google things that you don't know. And figuring out what you don't know, or like getting to the point where you hit a wall and then you start Googling stuff about how exactly to solve the problem and how you approach the problems in different ways. That is an experience that the on the tracks courses that are provided will not be able to complete. So you have to go out by yourself. You have to search for the things that you can't do. You have to run into problems. That's the most important part. Because when you're doing, let's say, practical experiments, and you like a particular practical experiment, you do it once in the semester, and then you essentially never touch it again. So if you like the wet lab work that you're doing, keep going out doing it again and again. Find a lab that you like. And this is pretty specifically applicable for those who are not in their fifth years, people who are in their third, fourth, or even first and second years. Personally, I would say, if the coursework that you're is not particularly interesting to you, or like find any lab that you're interested in, go and talk to the professor, explain to him why it is that you're interested in the subject, or like if you just want an introduction, ask him what exactly it is that he's doing. If you like it, ask him whether you can see what the instruments are like, how they work. And across the board, let's take like, how many of you guys over here have been to the instrumentation building that is there? Most of you, right? I would say.
Yeah, the central instrumentation facility. Is
Yeah,
that what you're
yeah,
talking about?
yeah.
Yeah. It's.
You guys have been there, right? Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know everyone.
No, not everyone, definitely.
Freshers haven't.
Yeah, so a lot of people have probably been there, essentially. I'll say quite a few people. You've seen all the instruments that are there, right? How many of them have you used?
No, I don't think so. Like, you'd have to wait in a queue and ask through the professor. Even the professors wait for queues, right?
Yeah, the professors have queues, right? And say CIFs and stuff like that is there. There's microscopes across the board that have been littered. The person that I respect most who does wet lab work, like there's a person in my back class that I respect most. He doesn't have the best grades. He has worse grades than me, and I have like okay-ish grades. And that chap would basically be sitting in a lab all day long and on his own. Essentially, he would come up with experiments on his own. He would do them on his own, and like he would run into problems on his own. And this part where he ran into problems and figured out how to fix them, that is the most important part of learning science. Because whenever it comes to your master's project, when it comes to your PhD, this is applicable across the board, by the way, regardless of whether you want to do industry or whatever. This is a subject that is basically, the idea is to gain a core competence, to be competent enough at what you're doing that if you run into mistakes, you'll be able to figure out firstly the cause of the mistake, or like run into any sort of error, you'll be able to figure out the cause of the error, and then you'll be able to work past it. That is the basic skill that everybody, and I mean everybody, should learn across the board, regardless of whichever field it is that you want to enter. and that's going to involve experience. You need to find a way to get experience, and this is part of the student's job only. I'm not going to blame the professors saying that, okay, you guys should do this, do that. It is a responsibility of the student to use the free time that they have to gain experience in the subject that they like, or at least find out what you like. People are not doing that. Simply, they are being introduced to these 20 different subjects. I've seen people like just sleep in the class and stuff like that. That is very common. You'll see like half the people in the back row will just be continuously sleeping and not giving a damn about the subject, and that is perfectly fine. But find a reason to care about what it is that you're being taught right now. That is the main thing that you should do. And it could be in the form of asking a question. Like I was very, 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 very well known in my class for asking random questions about subjects that should have, like, it's not that they have no business being asked, but I would essentially ask like a lot of weird questions. And what I was trying to do was basically find a reason, give myself a reason to engage in the content that is being taught to me, to try and figure out why is it that I'm learning this? What is it that came before? Why are the people who are using the technique in their current form using them? Was it simply a lack of money that they couldn't do something better? Is there something that is stopping them from using Y technique instead of X technique? Because you have 500 different ways to come up to the same answer, and yet we are using this one single technique. Why is it that is being used? Is it just because the lab doesn't have other instruments? And these questions will give you a solid understanding of what exactly it is that is happening in the field of whatever either you're being taught or whatever it is that you're interested in. So please go out ahead and do that. Like, be shameless, I guess, in that aspect. Go out and talk to professors as much as you can. Go out and ask them what it is that they're doing. Go out and figure out on the internet or through whatever means that you can whether or not there is some interesting scope for you or the techniques that you're interested in to be applied to that subject. And that is one of the best ways that you will have to gain competence in whatever it is that you're doing. And people have told me that, hey, it's just learning, and like you are still expected to be learning stuff when you hit your PhD, and it is not really a position where you're expected to be good at something. And that is, to me, like somewhat of an excuse that, hey, like you just like I can't really put it into words, because specifically in industry that sort of excuse is not really going to fly. That, hey man, I don't know how to use the Linux command line, or like there was too much stuff on Google so I couldn't figure out what the answer was. So this is stuff that is definitely not going to fly when you enter the industry. And specifically when you enter a PhD, it's going to be something that takes away your time, and time is pretty valuable when it comes to when you want to be spending a day in a like proper fashion. Yeah, so sorry for that longish rant, but that is something that I really wanted to get off my chest. Because it doesn't really matter whether or not you're going for industry, whether you're going for PhD. The difference is essentially minimum, specifically when it comes to startups, because you're developing new products. What is a new product when it comes to specifically science-based startups? A new product is basically people just reading through papers that have gone past. You make it something that can be viewed by a user or like viewed by a client in a way that is digestible to them. You're presenting to them risk scores. Genetic risk scores are basically like 200 years worth of science compiled into a single risk score for a client based on his ancestry or whatever, his risk to a particular trait. Let's say his risk to obesity. There are genetic risks that you can calculate for obesity. There are studies that have been calculated with regard to depression, mental health disorders. And presenting that risk score is essentially compiling 200 years worth of data that has been taken from articles, that has been taken from multiple different scientific experiments, and putting that in a way that is presentable to the clients. So there's not that much of a difference, except for the fact that you're delivering a product and that you have deadlines and expectations to meet with regards to that product. In the science aspect, you're going to have expectations from your professor and yourself pretty much. Like nobody else is going to probably care that much about, apart from you and your peer and probably some other people in the lab. Nobody else is really going to care. So you are the only one who's going to expect stuff from yourself. So be ready for that, essentially. Yeah. Any other questions? Well, I guess like the rant may probably caused everybody else to fall asleep. So yeah, that was.
I had another
Go ahead.
question.
Go ahead.
Is there any specific reason you chose not to join PhD
Yes,
like
yes,
the common stream,
yes,
like after BSMS?
yes. So I applied for a single PhD. It was in December, I think, where I talked to my professor. I was like, talked to my professor. I talked to a few other people. I was like, guys, please give me a referral. I'm going to apply to this particular spot. And while I was writing my SOP, and I took like 3 or 4 days to write my SOP for that particular position, and I realized that while I was looking at that position, that I could not find a reason to care. I'm like sorry to put it in those terms, but most of the PhD projects that I looked at were essentially like you have this project, you have essentially like here's the things that we want you to do. The project is already laid out in front of you. You're going to spend 3 years doing what we tell you to do. And that is something that doesn't really fly well with me too much. Like specifically if you're told that science is an open field, you're this like you can think about whatever you want, you can do whatever you want, but 90% of the time there's going to be realistic constraints on what it is that you can do with your time. You're either not going to have the instrumentation, you won't have the know-how, you won't have people with the know-how around you to be able to help out. There's going to be tons of things that are going to stop you from like doing that open air thinking that you originally envisioned. And part of that is definitely the fact that there is just directly like a project handed out to you, and that's what you're going to do for 3 to 4 years. That was the first thing that dissuaded me. Obviously I didn't get the PhD position, otherwise I would be here talking about how I got a PhD instead and probably regretting it, I'm not sure. But yeah, that was the first thing, that the project is already handed out to you. There is no free thinking involved here. Most of the time you're basically just essentially like a person who's working for, you're essentially doing an industry job, but it's under the guise of PhD, where you're trying to get a paper out within the next 3 or 4 years. And the second aspect of it. This was the first major aspect. The second aspect was actually related to like when I came to the institute itself. So I joined in 2016, right? And I came back home in 2017. And at the time I joined, I was 65 kilos. At the time I came back, I was 55 kilos. This was my first experience with freedom. I had spent my first year essentially not eating. I was just like roaming around, doing whatever else, like playing video games, watching anime, studying a little bit left, right, and center. And I ended up losing 10 kilos over the course of a year. And to the point where my nails had sunk in, I had gotten probably a bunch of vitamin deficiencies. I got a fungal infection as well. So I was unable to take care of myself in that year. And had it not been for the fact that I was allowed to go home at the end of it, I would have probably had a really, really bad time eventually. And the jump from life at home with a day college and going back home to eat and doing whatever to this particular hostel environment where you have pretty much freedom to do whatever you want. If you want to go and eat, you can go and eat. If you don't want to go and eat, you don't want to go and eat. That jump was something that I was not prepared to take for my first year. And after that, I realized that if you really want to, if the from hostel life to being essentially entirely free. Let's say you're going to go to PhD. Maybe there's a campus involved. Maybe there's not a campus involved. Maybe there's a mess given to you. Maybe there's a mess nearby. Maybe there's not. Maybe you'll have to prepare food by yourself. Maybe you're going to have to do your own laundry. Own laundry we usually do. So thankfully that's another thing. But maybe you're going to have to like iron out your own clothes and stuff like that. A lot of different things that you're going to have to do by yourself. And I was pretty sure that at the time I'm not prepared to take that leap of like essentially being completely self-reliant. So I decided to take at least some of the time that I had after my masters to like do small things. Like you start figuring out how to cook, you start figuring out how to do how people do their taxes. Essentially you start figuring out how people will like organize things, how people essentially like control their life and be healthy overall, like join a gym, go out and like live a healthy life and keep your essentially like be able to control all aspects of your home and be healthy while you're holding on to a job or doing something else. So these are the two primary reasons that I decided to not do a PhD. And probably there are some conditions over here that will not apply to you. Maybe you guys have already seen a project that you enjoy and that you're definitely going to enjoy. and that you have no idea, that you have no issues, that okay, I'm going to be spending 3 to 4 years doing pretty much this exactly, but I still don't mind that because I actually like the field that I'm in, and that's perfectly fine. If you feel so strongly about a particular project and you have the willpower to essentially not hate yourself for 3 or 4 years doing this particular thing constantly, then like absolutely go ahead. And if you are confident of being able to take care of yourself and be healthy after the end of it, and not lose a bunch of weight, or like not gain a bunch of weight, or like not only eat from fast food restaurants, then absolutely you should definitely go ahead and pursue or whatever. But I didn't have that confidence, so I decided to stay back. Yeah. So yeah, that was basically, these were the two major reasons. So yeah, anything else? I'm assuming not. So.
Have you prepared something like to tell important stuff to in the talk or something?
So the reason why I didn't prepare was essentially I was originally informed that it would be like a discussion-based talk, because unfortunately across like I came to so I have been in Bangladesh since December because my father, who's in the army, was posted there. I've been taking care of my mother, who has had an operation. So, and along with that, I've been essentially like working for my company, as you can see right now. So I have not had a lot of time to prepare per se, but yeah, like I think that I've mostly covered whatever it is that I wanted to talk about, because I have talked about what you can expect from a startup. I have tried to explain to you how exactly you can get into one, and it's not a very like special process. There is nothing special involved in it. You just have to talk to people. I've tried to explain to people why exactly it is that you probably like master's degree students or like MS students don't tend to get into these positions as freshers, why they require PhD experience half the time. And I think I've talked about why exactly it is that people, or at least I've given a few points for why exactly people should consider not going for a PhD in the first place. Oh yeah, what I have missed is probably why you should think about startups as an alternative. So in the past 4 months, I have done um, a lot of stuff. So I have implemented a imputation pipeline. So imputation is basically where you take a set of genetic variants, and because you know that linkage disequilibrium exists, you are able to impute these genetic variants from like 500,000 to, let's say, 5 to 6 million common variants. And using that additional data, you're able to improve your risk assessment for a particular trait. That is something that I did not know existed until like I guess 2 3 months back. I've implemented essentially a new mathematical pipeline calculation mechanism, and that was again something that was entirely new to me because it involved mathematical techniques that I didn't know about at the time at all. So the process of learning essentially does not really stop when you enter industry. You have to continue to update your information. You have to keep abreast of the knowledge, or like abreast of the things that are currently happening, papers that are currently being released with regards to the fields that you're working in. So you are still going to be learning the moment you enter industry. The only difference that is there within, let's say, PhDs in industry is the fact that if you find something that is new and worthwhile, you're probably going to be applying it, as opposed to just considering it to be something of interest in the side project to your particular field. So that's probably at least part of the reason why it doesn't necessarily mean entering industry doesn't necessarily mean that you're just going to void your career in research as a whole. So it's something that you should probably consider. But yeah.
Yeah, I had one final question.
Hmm.
Okay. See, I'm currently doing a maths major and a biology minor. So,
Hmm.
like, what are the opportunities, at least, let's say, in your field of
Hmm.
like mathematicians with like who have some prerequisite biology knowledge and like they can understand biology up to some extent. So, like, do they? What are the opportunities?
Yeah. So with regards to opportunities, mathematics uses, or like, sorry, biology uses a lot of maths. Let's not put any sort of like Like, I'm not trying to make it any sort of fashion. I'm not trying to do anything cool with it, but biology uses a hell of a lot of maths. Most of the biologists that you see across the board will tend to treat the programs that they use as black boxes. You take the input, you pray that it works, you pray that you shove it through some program, and then you pray that it works. And these black boxes are essentially constructed by the mathematicians of the world. So mathematics definitely has a lot of applications. With regards to statistical genomics, that is the field that I'm working in. Statistical genomics is essentially like, is it possible to draw on this board? I wonder. Actually, I can't draw. But basically, most of the variants that you see, let's say there is a genotype of a person, the genotype is AA. He has 2 chromosomes. He has one particular site that is being assayed on the 2 chromosomes, and that site turns out to be AA. It can be AT, it can be AC, it can be AG. And when you assay these for like 1,000 people, over 10,000 people, and you have different variants that can exist over there, that essentially eventually turns out to be a normal distribution. And the properties of the normal distribution, studying them and how they correlate to various diseases, is basically the entire branch of statistical genomics pretty much. And most of it has been built on the foundations of maths. So there is definitely a lot of opportunity for mathematicians with at least some prior knowledge of biology to get into the field, because you will understand the problems that biologists have to deal with regards to the mathematical issues, and you'll be able to build tools for them to either in research or elsewhere to do their work in a faster manner. So definitely there's a lot of applications which you can apply to. As for the specifics, that's definitely something that you're going to have to look out for yourself, because like I said, I've got 4 to 5 months worth of experience with regards to this. So there's not much I can help you with regards to where all exactly that you can do. What I can assure you is that if you look at papers across the board for the tools that biologists use, you will see a lot of mathematics being applied in there. So that's something that you should definitely look out for if you feel the need to switch to industry. So yeah, I think this is pretty much like, is there anything else? Not particularly sure. Well, are there any more questions? Because otherwise, like, I think we can end this. What are some of the skills required for entering industry? Okay. The issue is, so let's just start treating industry is not a buzzword by itself. You're not going to have uh, essentially the way in which labs are separated in IISER. It's going to be very close to the same thing within industries. You are not going to have just a single monolithic term that is industry, and it's never going to be a single skill that you will just magically imbibe and everything is going to be all right again. There are specific things that if you want to specialize in, you'll be able to go ahead and move in that direction. So if you want to do something related to tech, you're probably going to have to learn coding. If you want to do something related to, I don't know, something related to, let's say even in our companies, if you want to write, if you're interested in spreading science education, then you should definitely start picking up writing as a skill, because content writers are really, really important. Content writers or science content writers, they form the bridge between the tech team or like the science team and the tech team and other branches that actually communicate the information to the clients, because we as scientists are really, really bad at communicating information in terms that are simple to understand. So if whatever aspect it is that you like, focus on that, bring it up to something that is actually a selling point that you can actually sell to other people and say that, okay, I am good at this, I am able to do this. And how can you tell that I'm good at this? It's as simple as saying the space that you're currently looking at, the field that you're currently looking at, and asking yourself, could I make something like this? And actually trying to make it and succeeding. If you succeed at writing a piece for an article in, let's say, the magazine, and it's well received, then you can essentially say that that is a skill that you have that is capable of being marketed to other people. So it's a question of practice in the place that you're interested in. And this is something that I'm going to keep repeating. If you want to understand or if you want to enter the industry, then you're essentially going to have to be competent or gain some level of competence in a particular field that it is that you want to enter. So I was interested in the techniques. I was specifically interested in coding, programming skills. and I enjoyed the process more than the answers themselves. So people would present me with these small logical puzzles, or like as you see these like coding problems that appear across the internet. Those were like really really interesting to me, because you find figuring out novel methods to solve those was like something really cool stuff, at least for me. So yeah, there is no specific skill that you can gain and instantly enter into the industry. There is definitely a dearth of technical skills with regards to coding, which is why you're seeing the market so inflated, and why people are being paid such high salaries for tech skills. But if you want to enter through other methods, let's say wet lab technicians are also good. Wet lab technicians are also in decent demand, but that is a skill that PhD students will also come with. So that is definitely something that you'll have to compete with. If you want to write content, then start writing content for the magazines that are published on the institute, and try your hand at it. The more you practice, the better you will get at it. It's as simple as that. Yeah, Ankit.
Hi, Bharat. Long time.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, I had a question to ask. I wanted to ask you that, like, you are in a startup right now and you have
yes,
joined right after masters.
yeah.
So I was going to ask, imagine you with a qualification of a PhD. You have
Hmm,
already have a PhD,
hmm,
and you join the same company.
hmm.
So what would be your goal then versus what you have now? So what
Yeah,
would be the difference? And yeah.
yeah. So that is a really good issue, and that is the same question that I was asking myself. If I were to get a PhD in, let's say, any field, and then I were to apply to a startup, would there be any difference with regards to what I can afford them or offer them? And I think the answer to that is, uh, again, like there's going to be a lot of like changes depending on what exactly the field is that you go into. But I think that personally the answer is no, because you learn a lot more by actually sitting with the people who are building the products, who are making the features, and who are presenting them to clients. You learn a hell of a lot more through that process of iteration, as opposed to sitting in a lab and like essentially just sitting by yourself and doing stuff that you are definitely interested in, but you may not be able to present to clients in as easy of a manner. Your way of working, or your method, the method by which you iterate, might be very very different from the industry standards. And that is something that I noticed quite a bit. I was very, very used to coding by myself. I would just build a pipeline, or like I would build a program, and the program had no modularity. There were functions, there was no functions, there was just a single for loop, and that would iterate across every single file. That is a very, very slow method of doing stuff. I then realized when my code had bugs in it, how what a gigantic pain it was to fix those bugs. So now I started to think about implementing some level of modularity, starting to implement unit tests. Why exactly unit tests are even needed in the first place, and why you should test your code. Because if this gets shipped, if the product that was buggy, if it had gotten shipped, if I had not tested it, then that would have been a gigantic pain to fix in the future as well. And that is stuff that I've noticed even right now, where the current products that I'm replacing my own stuff with, they are there are like deep rooted issues within them that should have been solved earlier in the testing process itself, but they weren't. So now we are having to deal with them. So that is something that I feel that people will definitely learn, and this requires a focus on skills as opposed to field itself. Like if you focus on the skills that you can offer to a particular company, and transposable skills, ki bhai, uh, I have got a particular, let's say, skill that is coding. I can transfer it over to a technical industry with regard to bioinformatics. I can maybe do something like, even if I spend like a year more doing this particular thing, I could probably move into DevOps, probably start moving into actual hardcore coding. So these transferable skills from industry, or like from PhDs to industry, these skills are what you should focus on, not particularly the field, because that is what is going to give you power to like make this shift easier, and understanding problems. Because if there is a technique that they also use, understanding that technique, knowing what could go wrong with it, and then being able to implement one yourself, is definitely something that helps. And there's definitely labs that do this, by the way. Yes, there are definitely labs that are able to use these pipelines or implement these pipelines, and their scientific method is either better or worse, but they have gone through the same iterative process as these current companies have. And I personally feel that learning from the people in an industry is a lot faster to approach the same level of competence as opposed to a PhD. where you don't have that sort of team and technical skills with you.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I wanted my main question was based on like your qualifications, as in
Yeah.
imagine you with a master's degree going to the same place, and you with a PhD degree, like something other than nothing in between. You with a PhD degree and going to the same place. So, what would be the ranks that you would be in, or is it like you do not have hierarchy
There
in
is there is no
startups?
hierarchy. There is no
Okay, that's
hierarchy.
better.
That's the thing, right? So
I
whether you will
understand.
be paid more or less will depend upon an iteration, like over the duration of a contract, how well you do. Depending on that, you could definitely see a pay raise. You could definitely get kicked out, depending on whether or not you're good enough. So yeah, that
Yeah,
is also something to take care of. Like you need to offer them something if you're getting paid.
yeah,
It's a pretty big deal.
yeah. So,
So
do you? Okay,
hmm,
please continue. No,
go
I'll
ahead, go
ask
ahead.
later. Yeah, so I was just asking, do you hope to go to a more established industry later, or is it you will you
I'm
be staying with the startup for a while?
establish so when you say established, like I prefer the current process that we have right now, where things are a lot more open, where I can approach people whenever and however I want to. And being in an established industry doesn't necessarily improve your job security. It doesn't necessarily improve your prospects with regards to what it is that you can continue to do in the future. Established industries are essentially like places where the infrastructure has been set up in a way that it can no longer be changed.
Okay, yeah,
So yeah. So having a say in this particular process of being able to establish that infrastructure in the first place is something that I find kind of valuable, so
absolutely.
that you can see the process of evolution of these companies. And that is like a really cool thing to see. The way these people are slowly changing, finding better methods to do the same thing, or finding new methods to do things. That's
Yeah,
really cool.
absolutely understand. Yeah, I agree. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Nice talk.
Thank you. So yeah.
Are there any more questions? If not, I think we can end this session.
Yep.
So, thank you very much for this insightful talk. So, I would like to thank everyone who attended this talk and participated in the interactive session and for helping to make this a grand success. I would also like to thank our faculty advisor, Dr. Sadananda, and the School of Biology for their continued support towards Proteus. Wishing everyone a wonderful day and weekend ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bharat.